Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, Principal Atmospheric Scientist at Nutrient Ag Solutions, and I want to thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. Well, one thing is certain, that was over the last week it has been extremely wet in parts of North Carolina. You're looking at a map of total accumulated precipitation through 12 a.m. this morning here on Monday the 10th, and we can see that there are several pockets across the state that picked up better than 6 inches over the last week. Now, a lot of that came from Tropical Storm Isaias, and I'd like to talk to you briefly about that particular system because of this map right here. Now, I realize that many of you purchase insurance against hurricanes, and if we are able to observe wind speeds over the hurricane threshold, which is 74 miles an hour, some of these insurance claims will pay out should you have damage. So I went back and I looked at 3 different sources to understand what the winds were. First, I looked at radar data. Secondly, I looked at something called the RTMA, Maximum Hourly Average Wind Speed. And finally, I looked at the 1-minute time resolution ASOS data. Now, what is all of that? Well, with the radar data, I can at least get an idea about what the near-surface winds were. With the RTMA Maximum Hourly Average Wind Speed, this is a product where they take the wind speeds over an hour and average them. So it's not going to give you gusts, but at least tell us where the widest spread area of strongest winds were. What gives us the gusts are the black numbers on this map, which shows us the 1-minute ASOS data. Now, ASOS is Automated Service Observing System. It's a part of NOAA's National Weather Service weather station data. So when it comes to getting a valid data point from a wind speed measured by the hurricane, this is what most folks are going to be able to use. Unfortunately, outside of Wilmington, North Carolina, I cannot find a wind speed that got to 74 miles an hour. Now, that does not mean that locally you didn't experience it. And if you do have a weather station that collected and saved that data, keep it. Please keep it, because you can use it as a part of your claim when you go to the adjuster. But at this point, while we saw a lot of wind gusts that were in the 30 to 50 plus mile an hour range with some 60s as we got out toward the coast, finding from the National Weather Service a wind speed in excess of 74 miles an hour, I cannot find one except for down in Wilmington, North Carolina. So I wanted to give you that quick kind of post-mortem here on what Isaias did in terms of wind damage, because we did see quite a bit of wind damage. From there, what are the tropics doing right now? Well, in the main development region, we are watching an African easterly wave that's coming across the middle Atlantic. And the National Hurricane Center has given this a 60% chance of developing into a tropical depression. The European model is on board with that, in fact, bumping this up to 70 to 80% chance of developing over the coming 3 days. We'll talk about the low that will be developing here over the Carolinas in a few moments, but at this point, I think we just need to keep an eye on this over the next several days here to see how it interacts as it gets closer to the Lesser Antilles, kind of like what Isaias did. So the tropics are quite active right now. Speaking of how active they're going to be, last week on the 6th, NOAA updated its seasonal outlook. This is the highest number I've actually ever seen NOAA release, at 85% chance at being above normal. Now, remember, we're already at letter I, so we've already had 9 named systems, but they're calling for an extremely active year. You can see the number of named storms up there, somewhere between 19 and 25, with hurricanes 7 to 11, and then finally major hurricanes, those being category 3 and stronger, 3 to 6 of those. Now, how do those numbers compare to normal? Well, we can look over here at the Colorado State University forecast. These folks, I think, have been doing this for maybe 30 years. Very good at doing long-range forecasting. I know at Colorado State in the middle of the country, they're really good at hurricane forecasting, but they are. And this is what they've got. Okay, their 2020 forecast right now is looking at 24 named systems, average is 12. You can see when it comes to hurricanes, they are double the normal. Normal would be 6.4. They're looking at around 12. But I want you to come down here to this bottom statistic, accumulated cyclone energy. They're expecting this particular season to be double what is normal in terms of our accumulated cyclone energy. So all eyes are pointing toward a very active tropical season, and we're just now getting to the time of year when it gets active. What's going to help it along is the MJO, the Mad-Julian Oscillation. Now, little bit of background here. From May 31st through almost the end of July, the MJO sat over here in phase 1 and 2, standing wave over Africa. It was then forced out temporarily to phase 2 and 3, which is over here in the Indian Ocean. It then came out here just north of Australia and sat over in phase 5 this morning. It is forecast to go straight back over across the null space, that's the 0 line here, into phase 8, 1, and 2 again. That means that over Africa, we'll once again have a standing wave, and that will allow for better upper level support for the development of tropical systems over the Atlantic. So translation here, it is easier for the atmosphere to exhaust air upward here in the Atlantic Ocean and over Africa than it is anywhere else in the tropics. In fact, it's very hard for the atmosphere to breathe, if you will, over here in the Pacific Ocean. Now, this particular setup is conducive to a lot of tropical cyclone development, so we're going to have to watch it very carefully. Now, let's transition from the tropics into a little bit of a longer range forecast. You see, last week we also had released to us the new long range data from the European model. And over the next month, we see that it's going to continue to put high pressure somewhere here in the central Atlantic. It's not over by the US, and that's critical because the flow around this will be doing something like this. So unblocked flow coming out of the Atlantic, out of the Gulf of Mexico, no big ridges shutting things down. And as a result, we're going to have to watch for that storm track like we saw out of Isaias a lot this upcoming fall. Now, the European also paints this whole area active. You can see the green colors in there. Yeah, I know you see some browns in through this area, but we just need to look at this for the overall pattern. It's suggesting that over the next month, we're going to continue to see above average activity off of Africa with storm systems likely curling around like we just described here. Beyond that, what are some of the bigger factors as we go into September, October, November? Well, this is our La Nina. All right. Here's our very warm Atlantic Ocean temperatures. That La Nina we know typically calms down wind shear. And remember, wind shear is a change of wind speed and direction with height. Hurricanes cannot thrive or survive or strengthen in environments with high wind shear. So it's kind of strange, but the hurricane spins violently, but wants its environment in which it spins to be very calm. So what typically happens is this. This map over here on the left, or this graph, excuse me, shows you the value of wind shear across the tropical Atlantic. In the middle of winter, it's high. It then drops down during the hurricane season here and then comes back up later on this year. So what we look for is this. Years when there are El Nino events, in other words, when it's warm in through this area, the wind shear values, which in this case, the actual ones are in blue, well, they would do something like this and stay up here very high. When there's a La Nina, they tend to be near average or low. Now, what have we got? Look right here. You can see that we're very close to average in terms of our wind shear values. This is a piece to the puzzle in letting these would-be tropical systems become strong, okay? From there, September, October, November, you can see that the European model says keep the La Nina going. Keep this area warm. Those two features will allow for a much more active tropical year. We can even see into September, October, November. Look at where the high pressure cell stays. So this is our favorite track that we're going to watch this year. And certainly the September, October, November precipitation anomalies are highlighting that as well, keeping it wet. So that is a lot to be paying attention to. As we just zoom in here in the United States, our temperature patterns, well, I think it's going to be much of like what we've already seen this summer. We've had some warmth. We've had some above average temperatures at times. But overall, as we look forward here, maybe the temperature's closer to average, maybe a slight warm bias as we go into fall. But certainly along the coast, you can see that the models here are trying to keep things over on the wetter side as we progress forward in this forecast. Biggest wild card here is going to be hurricanes. So I was thinking about a few things here with some of the patterns that we've been watching develop. One is specifically that La Nina. So keeping on this long range thread here, when I looked in September, October, and November at the correlation between the Southern Oscillation Index and precipitation. Now what we typically find is that El Nino falls are correlated with heavier rainfall inside that area I just highlighted there. All right? That would mean La Nina falls would normally see drier conditions in through here. But La Nina also tends to produce a lot of precipitation there, and that gives us more tropical systems that can sneak through. So it's an interesting combination of events. And how do we know about what's going on? Well, take a look at this. There's the zero line on our Southern Oscillation Index map. Remember that when you get way up here, like +7 and above, we're talking about the atmosphere behaving in a La Nina fashion in the Central Pacific. It's there. We got these values up here, 4, 5, 6, 7 in their range. We've seen strong trade winds. We're forecasting those stronger trade winds to continue, although we do have a bit of a westerly wind burst coming up here. So this is why this particular feature is just doing this. It's going up and down and up and down. It's not a true La Nina yet, but it's trying to get there for fall. That is the point I'm trying to illustrate here. We can see that by looking at the latest long-range projections from the NMME. Follow that dashed black line. See how it comes down here and then goes back up for January, February, March? Well, what did I just highlight? You get below this dashed line here, we're talking about La Nina conditions. Above this dashed line, we're talking about El Nino conditions. So we're looking at something that's probably going to be a weak La Nina for the remainder of our fall. And that is critical for our temperature and precipitation patterns. That's what we wanted to get out here. Now, I just have to show you this. This is for entertainment purposes only, but I went ahead and let the model run out here all the way to January. And I'm going to tell you something. This would be kind of crazy for our upcoming midwinter, because what this particular pattern does is puts a big ridge right here and a trough in the west, which means we get weather systems that would come racing through the middle part of the country. Now, if this was the case, we would see much above average temperatures. But what ends up happening with this is you get these big warm-ups, but every once in a while, these deep troughs, they just come plunging down like this and run up the East Coast. So it's less frequent than if that trough was sitting here. But what this means is this is trying to shape up to be a very active winter with this La Nina probably fading, and a big ridge sitting somewhere in here would give us a very warm winter, possibly very wet as well. So entertainment purposes, I just want you to see it. We'll talk more about it soon. Okay, all the long-range stuff is out of the way. Let's now get to the near term. One of the issues we're having here over the south and southeast, getting up to the Carolinas and mid-Atlantic, is a very stagnant pattern in the atmosphere. You see, the main frontal boundary today is sitting back over here in parts of Illinois and Iowa. It stretches back into parts of Kansas. We have really strong winds coming through the Canadian prairies. But what we've had over here is generally higher pressure, just not blocking higher pressure. So today, what we're going to be watching here is all of our severe weather is going to be up here in the Corn Belt. All right. When we get into the next day, this will be on Tuesday and Wednesday. We have general risk of thunderstorms over here in the Carolinas, but the severe weather tends to stay away from us. And just to show you, we are watching for some very strong straight line winds today. So this could be tough on some of the corn and soybeans that are grown in parts of Iowa, Illinois, Indiana. We're going to watch this very carefully. Strong straight line winds are the name of the game today. But this is what you're going to see. You notice this is an animation from the high resolution rapid refresh model, and what it gives us is that, well, we can see the big nasty squall line coming through my home state, but do you see what's going on over here in the southeast under that very stagnant pattern? Just a lot of pop-up storms on the heat of the day. So they just come in and they pop, locally very heavy rainfall. But one thing I want to make you aware of is that sometimes the remnants of these big mesoscale convective systems or squall lines that go through the Corn Belt, what's left of them tries to come over toward the Appalachian Mountains and could trigger more storms over in parts of the Carolinas the following day. We're going to watch out for that very carefully. But still, when I look out longer term over the next 5 days, our total wind pattern here is stagnant compared to the rest of the country. This is a map that shows you accumulated maximum wind gusts through the next 5 days. And while it's very windy in the Canadian prairies and windy in the Central Plains, it's not very windy over by us. Just a lot of pop-up storms that can locally produce some heavy rain. And here's what I'm talking about. Weather Prediction Center has for the next week pretty widespread chances here of picking up 1.5 inches of rainfall just from some of these locally heavier amounts from some of these thunderstorms. Now, our models do not agree on anything right now across the country. It's actually quite maddening to look at these models and see how much they disagree. But there will be, I'm just going to point it out to you, there will be a lingering frontal boundary, very weak, on which I'm going to see daily thunderstorm activity all week long. So if you like to look at your favorite weather app, or you go to the National Weather Service and you see, 40 to 70% chance of rain every day, this is the scattered nature of our summer thunderstorms. And so the models can't pin that down. They're not designed to. I can at least show you what we're talking about here, though. And what you're going to see as I press play in this is watch the flashes of green almost every single afternoon right here. Are you ready? I'm just going to play it. Flash, flash. You can just see it hitting every day. It's those flashes of green that we're going to be watching here. Now, we're looking at the operational European model. We just see chances of storms today. Look at this. This is now getting into tomorrow afternoon and evening. Chances of storms once again. As we then go into Wednesday afternoon and evening. See the green showing up? Chances of storm once again. Toward the end of the week, the European model, this is Thursday night, now getting into Friday afternoon and evening. It has been trying to give some sort of, some sort of weak coastal low pressure development right here. And that's what we saw earlier. That could just take off into the ocean here and give us just a weak low, but it may increase some winds temporarily. It's weak. But again, it's through the next, it's beyond this. It's for the foreseeable future, daily thunderstorms. To kind of give you an idea here, this is the probability of getting an inch of rain over the next week. And you can see that North Carolina is almost entirely painted red, 90 to 100% chance of getting at least an inch of rain. By the way, major upgrade coming here from the National Weather Service for the GFS model. I'm going to be processing it this week. I can't wait to show you what it's going to look like here in our future forecasts. Here's the story though. Ready? This is by Friday. Look at the lows all lined up coming out of Alaska through the Canadian prairies. Look at the high pressure cells. There's one here, one there, here, and here. And to the south of it, there's a tropical wave there, there, and there. They're all kind of daisy chained up, moving across, the mid-latitudes here. And what this is meaning is that the flow is coming really strong out of the North Pacific, but then it's stagnant here over the southeast. And what's going to happen is systems are going to fire right in between it, and we'll get the remnants of those coming over here toward the Carolinas. So from there, what about week 2? Well, you can see the models continue to paint things wet. Daily convective activity. They're just not breaking away from that pattern. What's that pattern? Well, here's day 10 from the operational European. You can see the deep trough here, deep trough there, ridge over the four corners. The ensemble, same thing. There's the ridge, one trough, weak trough over here. The GFS has the same ridge, trough, weak trough over there. And that's why when we look at that pattern, it's going to give us the temperatures we're about to see plus the wetter than average conditions. So today, we're looking at temperatures here around 90. If we play this forward, again, tomorrow, same thing. As we get toward the end of the week, this is now Wednesday, upper 80s, low 90s. Getting toward Thursday, upper 80s, possibly cracking 90. Friday, depends on how much storms we have, maybe middle to upper 80s. As we then get into Saturday, this is where it could get really wet. Remember, we have that coastal low developing, maybe mid-80s, but it's going to be juicy, very humid. Same thing going into Sunday. What about looking out to the 6 to 10 day? Well, both models are trying to keep you right on average. See that? The heat's going to be under the ridge that's west. You see it in both models here. And that tends to last all the way out to the 11 to 15 day as well. That's where the ridge is going. So we might get near average temperatures, a lot of precipitation, hence the cooler weather that we see there. By the way, cooler, remember, is mid-80s instead of 90s. That's what we're talking about. From here, I would like to give you a brief update on some international weather. I know we're going long, but I got a lot to share with you. Major heat wave this week in this part of Europe, France and Germany. There are some places in France and Germany that do have regional drought development. But in Ukraine, cooler than average weather, even though it's going to be relatively dry. Same thing for the Russian wheat belt. We'll keep a close eye on that. Finally, I just want to give you an update on what's been going on over in China. There's a video just shared last week of what it looks like to see the Three Gorges Dam here. They've got this sucker wide open trying to get that water to move downstream. The Three Gorges Dam is under quite a bit of pressure right now, and take a look why. This was precipitation June 1st through the beginning of August, looking at how much rainfall we were able to measure from satellite. Now, the river system, the Yangtze River, we're going to watch. You can see it right over here. There's its path, all right? And it dumps right out here in Shanghai. So that's like the delta. The Three Gorges Dam is there, and we can see that in the watershed since June 1st, some places have received between 45 and 60 inches of rainfall. So that's why we've seen so much flooding problem here. And we can see that over the next week, the western side and the northern side of the Yangtze River is going to continue to get a lot of precipitation into its tributaries. So the flooding there as it presses against the Three Gorges Dam, which is pretty far upstream, is important to watch. Just remember, downstream of this, where I just circled right in through here, there's something like 500 million people. So this is a pretty serious situation. Before we finish this up, do notice that the northern China plain, where they grow a lot of corn and soybeans and other crops, very wet here in the forecast as well. Okay, we'll stop right there. Thanks for giving me your attention today. Had a lot to present to you, but hopefully it was intuitive and can be useful to your operations. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll talk to you next Monday. Thanks.